An inch. Maybe 2. That's how close Special Agent Jerry Dove came to ending the deadliest gunfight in FBI history in its opening seconds, and that razor-thin distance would haunt American ammunition design for the next 2 decades. It was the morning of April 11th, 1986, in a quiet residential corner of Pinecrest, Florida. 8 FBI agents had spent the morning hunting 2 serial bank robbers, men suspected in a string of violent armored car and bank heists across South Florida. The agents cornered their targets, Michael Platt and William Matix, on Southwest 82nd Avenue, forcing their car into a tree and blocking the road. What followed lasted less than 5 minutes. When it ended, roughly 145 rounds had been fired. 2 agents were dead, 5 more were wounded, and both suspects lay dead in the street. Only 1 agent on scene walked away untouched. It remains, decades later, one of the most exhaustively studied gunfights in American law enforcement history, taught in academies not for its outcome, but for everything that outcome forced the country to fix. Early in the fight, Jerry Dove fired his 9mm service pistol and struck Michael Platt almost perfectly. A hit that traveled through Platt's upper right arm and into his chest cavity, stopping a hair short of the heart and collapsing a lung. By every measure the FBI would later use to judge a good hit, this was one. The shot placement was correct. The angle was correct. And yet Platt did not go down. What happened next is the part serious students of this fight never forget. Platt climbed out of his crippled car and kept fighting, absorbing hit after hit, moving with a kind of violent momentum nobody in that intersection was prepared for. Agents Gilbert Arantia and Ronald Risner, both still able to fight from cover, poured 9mm and revolver fire into him. Platt was hit again in the thigh, the foot, the back. None of it stopped him. He turned his rifle on Supervisory Special Agent Gordon McNeil and wounded him in the neck. He shot Agent John Hanlon in the hand, then the groin. He closed on Benjamin Grogan and killed him at close range. Then he killed Jerry Dove with 2 shots. Through all of this, the agents were fighting 2 enemies at once: Platt's rifle and their own equipment. Most of the FBI agents on scene that morning were still carrying revolvers, 6 shots at a time, reloaded 1 round or 1 speed loader at a stretch, while a man with a rifle and a spare 30-round magazine kept moving and kept firing. Special Agent Edmundo Mireles took a rifle round through his left forearm early in the fight, shattering bone, and kept fighting one-handed. He emptied his shotgun, one-armed, working the pump against his hip, and hit Platt in the feet. Then, bleeding heavily and every instinct telling him to stay down, Mireles stood, drew his revolver, and advanced alone across open ground toward the stolen FBI car where Platt and Matix were trying to escape. He fired 6 rounds through the window at close range. Those were the shots that ended it. Mireles later wrote his own account of that morning, and the detail that stays with most readers isn't the 6 shots. It's that he made himself stand up first. Mireles survived. Jerry Dove did not. And in the immediate aftermath, blame fell where it usually falls first, on the men holding the guns. The Bureau's internal review, completed just weeks later, stopped short of formally assigning fault in writing, but agents who lived through it carried a quieter verdict for years afterward. That if they'd shot straighter, moved faster, reacted better, 2 of their own might have come home. Jerry Dove wasn't alive to defend the shot that should have ended the fight in its first 30 seconds, and for a while. Nobody was looking hard enough at the bullet itself. That's the part of this story most people get wrong, because it's the part gun shops rarely tell. The popular version says the FBI simply went bigger after Miami, panicked, and reached for more power. It's a tidy story, and it's largely wrong. The real story is slower and more forensic. And it starts with agents inside the Bureau's firearms training unit refusing to accept the easy answer. Chief among them was Special Agent Yuri Patrick, whose research would become the foundation document of American law enforcement ammunition testing. Patrick and his colleagues in the FTU spent the years after Miami building something almost nobody in American policing had built with any rigor before. A scientific model of what actually stops a human threat, rather than a folklore of stopping power passed down through gun shops and squad rooms. They gathered wound ballistics data from real shootings. They consulted trauma surgeons who treated gunshot wounds every week, medical examiners who autopsied the ones that didn't survive, and military researchers who had studied battlefield injuries for decades under far more controlled conditions than any street gunfight allows. In 1988, they hosted a wound ballistics workshop, pulling together the country's leading voices on the subject to argue out, on the record and often in sharp disagreement, what a bullet actually needs to do to stop a determined attacker who does not know or does not care that he has already been mortally hit. What they found reframed the entire tragedy. Jerry Dove hadn't missed. His 9mm Silvertip hollow point had done exactly what Winchester built it to do: expand fast and dump its energy close to the surface. That was not a flaw in the ammunition by 1970s and early 1980s standards. It was the whole design philosophy of the era. Law enforcement and ammunition makers alike were haunted by stories of over-penetration. A bullet punching clean through a suspect and striking a bystander down the block. And the entire industry had spent a decade building rounds that expanded violently and stopped fast specifically to avoid that outcome. The Silvertip Jerry Dove carried that morning was, by the thinking of its own time, a responsible round. The problem was that fast expansion and shallow penetration were the same design trait wearing two different names, and on April 11, 1986, the round that had been engineered not to hurt an innocent bystander also failed to reach the heart of a man who was killing federal agents. It paid for that design choice in the last inch or two it needed and didn't have. The bullet wasn't a failure of the man who fired it. It was a failure of an entire generation of thinking about what a defensive round was supposed to do. By 1989, that research produced what the industry now calls the FBI Ballistic Protocol, a standardized battery of tests still used today by nearly every major American ammunition manufacturer. Bare gelatin, heavy clothing, plywood, wallboard, sheet steel, automotive glass. A bullet had to punch through those barriers, simulating a car door, a winter coat, a wall between rooms, and still reach 12 to 18 inches of penetration in ballistic gelatin, or it didn't qualify as a duty round, full stop. Rounds that expanded too aggressively and stopped short, the exact failure that doomed Dove's shot, were disqualified just as surely as rounds that over-penetrated and blew through a target without transferring enough energy to stop him. It was the first time a law enforcement agency had told the ammunition industry, in plain, testable, repeatable numbers, exactly what enough meant, and it took the argument out of the realm of marketing claims and into the realm of a pass-fail exam that any manufacturer could run in a lab. The immediate weapons response to Miami had already arrived by then, and it came with its own hard lessons. The FBI abandoned the revolver as a primary duty weapon almost immediately, citing the same reload problem that had nearly cost Mireles and Hanlon their lives, while Platt simply dropped an empty magazine and slapped in a fresh one. The Bureau moved towards semi-automatic pistols across the board. For ammunition, the Bureau initially reached for the 10mm auto, paired with the Smith & Wesson 1076, a big, powerful round that solved the penetration problem the hard way, with raw energy far beyond what the 9mm Silvertip had carried. It solved it too well. The recoil was brutal enough that qualification scores across the bureau dropped noticeably, especially among smaller-framed agents who simply couldn't control the pistol under rapid, repeated fire the way the job demanded. Agents who could put 5 rounds on target in 2 seconds with a 9mm were suddenly fighting the gun itself with the 10mm, and a cartridge that nobody could shoot consistently under stress wasn't actually solving Jerry Dove's problem. It was trading one kind of failure for another. The Bureau downloaded the round to a reduced power variant, commonly called the 10mm Light, chasing the same terminal performance with less punishment on the shooter's hand and wrist. That downloaded round is where the real invention hides, the part of this story that almost never gets told with an FBI agent at its center. Ballisticians at Smith & Wesson and Winchester noticed something simple. The reduced power 10mm load wasn't using the full length of its case. All that unused brass down at the base of the cartridge was dead weight, extra length that forced pistols to be built larger than they needed to be just to hold a case that was only partially filled with powder. So the two companies, working together, did what firearms engineers do when a full-size case is carrying a half-size load. They shortened it. The result, introduced in 1990, was a new cartridge built to fit standard 9mm frame pistols. No bigger grip, no punishing recoil impulse, while still matching the terminal performance the FBI's own protocol demanded on paper and in gelatin. They called it the 40 Smith & Wesson, and departments across the country adopted it fast, because Smith & Wesson and Winchester understood exactly how much influence the Bureau's protocol now carried over every police procurement contract in the country. Within a decade, the 40 Smith & Wesson was the most widely carried duty cartridge in American law enforcement. Adopted by departments from small-town sheriffs to major metropolitan forces, all chasing the same standard that a dead agent in Pinecrest had forced into existence. It wasn't marketing. It wasn't fashion. It was traceable, in a straight line, back to an inch or two of tissue in a Florida gunfight and a research team that refused to let a fallen agent's reputation be the price of a bad bullet design. The .40 caliber's reign didn't last forever, and that's worth saying plainly, rather than pretending this story ends in permanent triumph. Bullet technology kept improving long after 1989. By the 2010s, advances in bonded cores and controlled expansion 9mm projectiles had closed the performance gap that doomed Jerry Dove's shot, delivering the same reliable penetration the old Silvertip couldn't manage, without the recoil penalty of the 40 or the 10mm. Many agencies, including the FBI itself, eventually returned to 9mm duty pistols, citing higher magazine capacity, easier control under stress, and faster follow-up shots. That return isn't a rejection of what Miami taught the industry. It's the opposite. The 9mm carried by agents and officers today has to pass the exact same unforgiving protocol the 10mm and the 40 were built to satisfy. The same bare gelatin, the same barriers, the same 12 to 18 inches of penetration Uri Patrick's team demanded back in 1989. The cartridge changed. The standard didn't. It survived even after the specific rounds that first met it were quietly retired from frontline service. No official autopsy figure for that shot has ever been published for public reference, which is the one detail worth being honest about before closing this out, and it's worth saying plainly rather than letting the drama of a single inch drown out everything the record does confirm. What isn't in dispute is the outcome. A well-placed 9mm round failed to stop a determined attacker, and that failure was documented closely enough by enough independent witnesses and investigators to become the founding case study of modern wound ballistics. Edmundo Mireles recovered from his wounds and went on to become an instructor at the FBI Academy, carrying the lessons of that morning directly into the training of new agents. For years afterward, the Miami Shootout stood as the case study that opened firearms training for incoming agents, not to frighten them, but to make one point unmistakable: the gun you carry and the ammunition you load are not abstractions, they are decisions that arrive, uninvited, in the worst 30 seconds of somebody's life. Every agent who has qualified with a duty pistol since 1989 has, without necessarily knowing his name, trained against a standard built in Jerry Dove's memory. That's the part worth sitting with. Jerry Dove is not a household name outside of firearms history circles. There's no statue, no cartridge stamped with his initials, no plaque most Americans will ever read. But every duty round tested against the FBI protocol today, whether it's chambered in 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, or 45 Auto, exists because of the inch his shot came up short, and because a handful of agents in the firearms training unit refused to let his memory be reduced to a training failure. They went looking for the truth in the wound, not the myth in the marksmanship. And American law enforcement has been safer for it ever since. The bullet that failed him became the standard that would never fail like that again.